All right, now let us welcome the last team to present from Division D. Please welcome Dynamics Consulting. The team will have 5 minutes to set up, and you can start whenever you're ready.
Pong is the owner of a mid-sized retail store in Singapore, Thailand, and Malaysia. His stores sell luxury retail goods, and he's looking to get into e-commerce because he sees this trend emerging in the market. The current provider of his marketing and logistics is DKHS, but he sees that DKHS currently does not have e-commerce as part of its value chain. So this means that he's going to have to look for another provider for e-commerce so he can get his goods online. Good morning. We are Dynamics Consulting. My name is Shruti Shah, and I'll be presenting the industry analysis and the company analysis. Lewis and Jason will be presenting the strategy. Brittany will present the financials, and then I will conclude the presentation. So let's go ahead and get started. So for our analysis, first, let's take a look at the key questions that we need to answer. The first key question is, how can DKHS leverage its current Asian market leadership to integrate e-commerce into its value chain? The second key question is, what specific strategies does DKHS need to employ in order to make e-commerce something that is attractive to its customers? We're going to accomplish this through our three-pronged strategy: expand, equip, and establish. We want to expand e-commerce operations across Southeast Asia, starting with Thailand. We want to equip retailers with alternative payment systems. And finally, we want to establish the presence of online shopping with Thai consumers and make them more comfortable with that concept. The overall impact of this strategy will be an increase in earning potential by 700 million CHF in the next 3 years by driving consumers from bricks to clicks. So let's take a look at all the alternatives that we considered when coming up with this strategy. The first three alternatives, Facebook ad campaigns, credit card penetration, and providing end consumer logistics, we found to be both unfeasible and not fitting for the company, because the company is B2B, not B2C. So then we looked at the next three alternatives: a pop-up boutique, acquisition of an e-commerce company, and partnership with an alternative payment company. These are the options that we saw as most viable, both with the company fit and with feasibility. Now let's move on to the challenges that we face. There are challenges that we can address, and then risks we simply can't. The challenges that we can address are lack of consumer awareness of e-commerce, the lack of viable payment options, and finally, increased consolidation in the industry, which we've seen with Rakuten and then also with other companies that are acquiring different companies to increase their foothold in the e-commerce industry. And if DKHS wants to do the same, we're going to have to act immediately. Some uncontrollable risks are uncertain political situations, along with socioeconomic factors, trends in internet and mobile use, and also the competition that we face. Although we may not be able to drive out the competition, we can definitely make sure that we can withstand them and overcome them. So let's look at the most important statistics that we see. Thailand has a 72% bank penetration, which means that these customers are ready to shop online. At the same time, they have a low credit card penetration, but a low internet penetration. Malaysia, a company that we would like to expand to and that we will discuss later, has also a high bank penetration, a low credit card penetration, and a high internet penetration, which means that these consumers are ready to shop online. However, for both of these countries, the preference for electronic payment is low. What does this mean? This means that we need to increase the awareness for online shopping by using a bricks-to-click strategy. And finally, we also need to establish a strong foothold, a strong presence in e-commerce with diverse payment options. With that, I will pass it on to Lewis, who will cover the first part of our strategy.
As Shruti briefly explained, the strategy today is quite simple. We're going to expand DKSH's product offices. We're going to equip the Southeast Asian market with the power to have alternative payment options on the internet, and we're going to establish a consumer preference for shopping online as opposed to the malling culture that we see today. This is where the Asian consumer lies right now. They have a low desire to shop online and a low availability to pay for this. There are two types of consumers, three types really, of consumers in the Asian market. Those that are banked and willing to pay online with their debit or credit card, those that are banked and unwilling to use their credit cards online, and those who are simply unbanked and do not have access to a debit or credit card to make these payments. We'll address all of these today. Beginning with why we would want to establish A-commerce, which is an e-commerce services company, much like DKSH is for every other aspect of expanding in another market. The goal is to expand how many services DKSH can provide to its consumers simply by adding on A-commerce, which is an extremely congruent company, to them and using and leveraging their e-commerce services sector of the company. Let's begin by explaining what A-commerce is. A-commerce is a one-year-old company owned by Paul, who's a serial entrepreneur. Paul has started this company, bred this company, all with the hope and expectations of selling it for a profit. What is A-commerce? A-commerce is much like DKSH's, but in the e-commerce field. They provide online marketing, online campaigns, online web fronts, and then they take it not only there, but they take it from the warehouse to the consumer's home. They provide the logistics as well. Very much like DKSH, this company is 90% the same and falls in line with the strategy that DKSH uses for expansion, which is bolt-on acquisitions. When should this acquisition take place? As soon as possible. We personally believe it should start as soon as today. The benefits of this acquisition are very simple. One, it's a bolt-on acquisition strategy which DKSH is very comfortable with because they do the marketing, the sales, the logistics, the warehousing, but they have the piece that DKSH is currently missing, the e-commerce services, the online marketing, the Facebook marketing, the Instagram marketing. And that's why we would like to acquire A-commerce. As we can see here, it fits very well into the DKSH corporate model. It grows existing business units with a bolt-on acquisition, that's 90%, the logistics, the marketing, the sales. Then it strengthens the service offering by adding on the e-commerce section, the Facebook marketing, the campaigns, the flash sales, the online advertising, the pop-up boutiques. And lastly, it increases operational efficiency because as you can see here, DKSH is in the following locations. A-commerce overlaps in the 4 areas that they're in: Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and the Philippines. This overlap means that it's going to be a perfectly harmonious acquisition, and there's an added bonus. Currently, DKSH does not offer full-line marketing and sales services in the Philippines and Indonesia. However, with this new acquisition, they'll be able to at least provide e-commerce services for marketing and sales. And then DKSH is a forward-looking company. We suggest that they move to the yellow star, Malaysia. As Shruti explained, Malaysia is primed with banking penetration and internet penetration rates. The only thing that's missing is an acceptance penetration, which DKSH, with our strategy, can provide. The last problem that we mentioned was payment portals. When you shop online, there's a point at that transaction where a user has to stop and insert their credit card information. A-commerce has their own proprietary payment portal, and if we can expand it through DKSH network, it will become more ubiquitous and more widely accepted. However, that problem doesn't address those two consumers that we were talking about earlier, those unwilling to use their credit cards online and those that don't have credit cards to use online. With that, you can see how this portion of the strategy answers the question of how DKSH can leverage its Asian market expertise to incorporate e-commerce with its existing value chain. Moving on to equip. We have to equip the Southeast Asian market, particularly the Thai market, with a way to alternatively conduct online purchases. Our strategy is to partner with an online alternative payment service called 123. The goal here is to make a ubiquitous online payment system that consumers can feel safe with without the need of relying on credit card technology through the internet. This is a comparison of the users that we were talking about earlier. Both like cash on delivery, which is not very good for the person making the delivery. For if a user does not have the cash, then we have to redeliver the product, and it makes handling 3PL logistics a nightmare. So in order to eliminate that, we are suggesting using the 123 system and spreading it among all retail outlets possible. The 123 system is as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1, the consumer goes on the internet and finds a product they wish to purchase. 2, they pay through the 123 system, and the 123 system spits out a barcode. And 3, that barcode can be taken to one of currently 35,000 locations in Thailand to be paid for in person without the need of entering information on the internet. And then the product is shipped. This is a typical barcode from 123, and the user can either write that down, upload it to their smartphone, or print it out and take it to a location to be redeemed. What we suggest is partnering with this company in order to create the following. DKSH has over 300,000 retail outlets that can begin accepting and processing these types of transactions in order to take the locations from 35,000 to 335,000. This ensures success of the alternative payment system, which is a wider reach. And with that, we answer the question of how the strategy of how DKSH can employ e-commerce into gathering more customers. Now Jason will explain the remainder.
Louis just explained the first part of our strategy. How exactly are we going to gain the infrastructure needed to be leaders in the e-commerce market? He also explained how we're going to equip the Thai consumers and the Southeast Asian consumers with a way to pay online. I'm going to conclude our strategy by covering how we're going to establish ourselves in the e-commerce market. The first thing we're going to do is battle the key issues. The first key issue is that Southeast Asia is accustomed to malling. It's a part of their culture. We have to be able to transition them into online buying. Also, there's a lack of awareness in online shopping, and then finally, retail stores lack integration. Our goal is to create a process that allows for comfortability with the Thai consumers. We're proposing to implement pop-up boutiques. Essentially what they are, pop-up boutiques are small, short-term sales spaces within large retail locations. And they offer ways to build upon existing product lines. DKSHS is a market leader in market expansion. And they have a key strategy with implementing local cultures and local tastes with each office and location. We're doing that here with our themed pop-up boutiques. The online-only items will create a sense of urgency and exclusivity among customers. Here's an example of pop-up boutiques. They're very modern, and they have the iPad capability to ease with online transactions. Our sales clerks will walk them through the buying process because most customers haven't necessarily bought a product online before. The payment incentives, if they pay with card or pay with our ABC system, they'll have a discount of 5%. This is showing a pattern and creating a pattern for online buying here in the Southeast Asian market. Our 4 Ps, our product is going to be the pop-up boutiques with a pricing strategy which will be current when they're implemented. And then finally, our promotion will be on social media advertising with the acquisition, and also flash sales and theme displays. As you can see, our exclusive selection of products and our ability to try, touch on, and view products equal a sense of urgency and a way for customers to buy and walk them through the buying process, therefore creating a pattern for online buying here in the Southeast Asian market. This answers the final key question. The timeline, we like to begin the acquisition now for e-commerce, along with implementing the 1-2-3 system. Once that is implemented, we will then move forward with moving in our pop-up boutiques. I will now pass it to Brittany to go over our financials.
So let's get down to the numbers. First, for our assumptions, we are assuming the Swiss franc in millions of dollars, as well as a weighted average cost of capital of 7.03%, and a combined annual growth rate of 8%, which came from the company's financial presentation for 2013 in the letter to shareholders. In addition, we are focusing only on the consumer and luxury goods segment. Now, this provides a brief financial overview of where your company stands now. In 2013, DKSH had revenues of about, in the consumer goods segment only, of about 4 billion francs, and operating profit of about 150 million francs. And this consumer goods segment represents about half of the company's financial performance. Now, if we break out Thailand from this revenue historical figure, we can see that it represents about 85% of the consumer goods segment, showing that Thailand is a large focus for this company. Now, this chart here shows our metrics for success for our proposal. As you can see on the left, these are the current goals for the penetration as well as payment rates in Thailand. And on the right, we have shown our goals for these figures, and we feel that these numbers are very feasible because of the fact that certain Southeast Asian countries are already seeing these percents. And it would represent successful customer education as well as expansion of the financial services sector and e-commerce growth for DKSH. Now, where is your moneymaker? This lies in the e-commerce acquisition as we have proposed. So how did we value this acquisition? Well, e-commerce does not have publicly disclosed financials, so we decided to use prior transactions in the e-commerce services and logistics space to determine a reasonable valuation range. So when looking at the acquisition cost, we looked at Google's acquisition of Channel Intelligence for $125 million last year, as well as Docomo's acquisition of a company last year for tens of millions of dollars, particularly fine trade in Austria. And finally, just in May of 2014, we looked at Alibaba Group's agreement to control 10% of Singapore Post, particularly their trade services and logistics segment, which is exactly what we are proposing for the e-commerce space, and that was for $312.5 million, leading to a range for our acquisition costs. We also focused on the Singapore Post segment with the e-commerce logistics space to come up with starting revenue points. As you can see on the low end of our net present value, it's at the worst case scenario, it's 135 million net present value, which doesn't sound so bad to me. But if we look at the high end of this range, assuming 10% revenue growth annually, starting with 300 million revenues, and a $50 million acquisition cost, that leads to a grand net present value for this acquisition of e-commerce of 700 million francs. Now, the next thing we looked at were the pop-up boutique costs. These are very low relative to the company's revenues. So basically, we looked at the displays in the store for setup, marketing team, and the actual materials, as well as changing them throughout the year, the themes, and the iPads to sell, totaling about 5,500 francs. Now, this cost is minimal considering the amount of additional revenue that they would bring, as well as the operational capabilities that they would provide. So going back, this shows from our acquisition where your revenues stand today based on the 8% growth, and then the green line on top shows, adding on the acquisition, where your revenues will be. This shows the dramatic increase in top line capabilities that acquiring e-commerce will bring. Now, these are some of the risks that we considered when looking at our acquisition and our strategy in general, and their mitigants, and I would be happy to go over these during the Q&A session if you would like. I will now pass it back to Shruti, who will conclude our presentation.
So as you can see, we have answered our two key questions. First, how can DKSH leverage its Asian market leadership to integrate e-commerce into its current value chain? And second, what strategy should DKSH use to make this strategy more and more attractive to its customers? And we've done this through our three-pronged strategy of expand, equip, and establish, leading to the overall impact of an increase in earning potential by CHF 700 million. So let's take a look at this graph that we saw earlier. Now, currently there's a low preference for online shopping and low rates of online payment, but we want to increase this with our strategy to high preference for online shopping and high rates of online payment. So with that, we'd like to conclude our presentation and open the floor to questions.
Starting from me first. I want to ask about when you describe e-commerce, do almost the same things like DKSH in terms of logistic warehousing, except they promote their products online. So how do you justify the investment of acquiring a company which is almost similar to yours versus building the additional capability of selling products online?
Yes. So if we look here, it's easy to see that the way that DKSH's growth strategy follows is with these types of bolt-on acquisitions. Bolt-on acquisitions are meant to be this way. They're meant to be where the companies are highly congruent and fit almost perfectly. So while 80% of the company is similar, that 20% of e-commerce services, that online marketing, that online logistics, that 3-day or next day delivery types of 3PL services in a specific region are the differences that why we would want to acquire a company like this. There's no need to reinvent the wheel in this situation, and it flows really well with the company model, which is why the acquisition is better than investing your own capital, training your own people, figuring out the e-commerce system on your own. We can just use a company that already has a working model.
Okay. Actually, we have many ways to expand business way. Acquisition is one of the best way and the fastest way. And because e-commerce is one of the hot company in the e-commerce market right now. Many companies are already invested in e-commerce, right? And how do you make sure that you offer the deal to the e-commerce and they're gonna to sell the company to you? If they not deal, what is your second option to doing that?
Next slide. Yes. So there is a risk that the acquisition doesn't go through. However, we personally looked at Paul, the owner of the company, the man in charge of this situation. He is a serial entrepreneur. This is what he does for a living. He starts companies and he lets them go. He did this just last year with a group purchasing company similar to Groupon, which he sold to Living Social for a small $18 million. Therefore, with the confidence of knowing that who we're buying from, we first don't think that this deal will fall through. However, we've looked at 2 separate companies to acquire if this doesn't happen. The first is Bella Asia in Indonesia, which started in 2013 and is again extremely similar to DKSH. And additionally, Anchato in Singapore, which is again very similar to DKHS. Where these 2 companies differ though is in their desire to be expansive all over the Southeast Asian region. These 2 companies are very country focused, and that's why we chose e-commerce instead of that.
Probably a different question or a different angle to the question. If you look now at the current evaluation of these companies in this area, very high. So how should we sell it internally to our board to make such an acquisition? It's very high, probably very high multiple.
What was the last part of that?
How are you going to sell internally to the board, to buy a company which presumably will have a quite high multiple if you look at the current valuation in this sector?
Yeah. Well, basically, we would run through the different valuation techniques for the company to show the addition that it would bringing on, and you can work with different teams, investment banks, to come up with that valuation, and then pitch it to your board, and then work through the different options for what they want, the valuation range that they think is reasonable, and what they want to start off with the offer for. And then as well, if they want to go another route with perhaps one of the other companies mentioned, or if they want to do something instead of an acquisition, such as a joint venture or an associate, which is something that DKSH does do.
Additionally, from a market perspective, this type of market is in consolidation right now. If you can see the acquisitions being made by Alibaba and Rakuten in Japan, this time to buy one of these corporations is right now. If not, they're going to get either more expensive or too big to acquire. So the board might want to jump on this investment opportunity to expand DKSH in an area that it's looking for, and then take the plunge in a time where this is what the market's doing, and not miss the plane.
From your presentation, page 38, looks like you expect the growth of the business very high, right? So, and how about your marketing strategy? How you increase the market share? How you gain the market on this business after you buy the e-commerce or whatever?
Yeah, this timeline is shown just for our goal within the timeline that we've set out. So it would be obviously not necessarily within 3 years, but this is where we want these segments to be in Thailand, and this is where we think they can be. So this isn't something that's necessarily happening soon, but if you look at Singapore's figures, Singapore already has similar percentages in these different segments. So that makes it feasible for our space. However, to address your marketing concern, we would definitely utilize our marketing team to take advantage of the social media that the marketing team is already engaged in, using applications such as Line, Instagram, celebrity tags, Facebook, to get the word out there about the e-commerce space and the opportunity that the consumer has in online shopping.
Additionally, DKSH has a plethora of clients already that aren't being served in an e-commerce sphere by DKSH. So when we acquire e-commerce, we can introduce this new product service to existing consumers, to existing clients.
Dynamics, a question on this side. Thank you very much for the presentation. As far as I understand, a lot of the strategy and the recommendation that your team has been making is all around a bolt-on strategy in terms of acquisition. Can you talk to me more about the existing DKSH business model in terms of what aspect of the existing business do you see as supporting the strategy that you're recommending, and on the other flip side, where you see potential areas where it could sort of detract, against the strategy that you're recommending?
These two infographics are actually DKSH infographics. This is exactly the DKSH model for growth. So I think in the three areas that we match are in growing business units that are already existing because of how congruent the companies are, in strengthening the service offering by including the e-commerce services that the company doesn't currently have, and increasing operational efficiency because we're providing more of the same services in 4 overlapping regions. However, that third one is also where it lacks because there might be an issue with redundancy. And in that area of redundancy, it's going to be either hit or miss. Currently, both companies are operating in the atmosphere cohesively and servicing clients, so we didn't feel that the redundancy issue would be too big of a risk.
Just if you can expand a bit further in terms of another level of detail around particularly the existing retail network within DKSH and versus how that network may perceive the pop-up stores and the 1, 2, 3 payment, etc. Just expand on that.
Well, the current model is servicing clients and logistics, product servicing, distribution, marketing, sales. And what we're trying to do with the pop-up boutiques is create a sense of comfortability with purchasing things online. Right now, customers aren't necessarily very comfortable with purchasing online. And by acquiring e-commerce and using the pop-up boutiques, we're able to, gain another aspect of purchasing online, using credit cards, and really exploring a new market that is virtually not too touched as we speak. It's a time to really take advantage of it, and the distribution, buying e-commerce and using the current services they have will only seem to add to the services that we currently have in place.
Just to add to that, for our pop-up boutiques, we will be focusing on the retail and luxury goods portion of the business within consumer goods. And this is because within the large department stores, it makes sense to have this kind of setup, whereas a fast-moving consumer goods business would not as much. And this is allowing us to start with this client or consumer segment, essentially, to get them comfortable, and then it spreads the word. That opens up opportunities for us to move on to the other segments and try alternative things, getting people onto the online platform more.
Okay, I have a question. Probably would like to understand more about e-commerce that you mentioned, and how that fit again. If you flip to page slide 15, the value chain of the KSH. 15. Yeah. They do distribution and logistics, as e-fulfillment. They do after-sales service, e-commerce. How they do the marketing and sales? They have their own store, or web hosting, or how e-commerce will help bringing traffic, basically, or sales to the product that we plan.
E-commerce currently, like many e-commerce companies, just does online web marketing. So the product that right now e-commerce handles is creating websites for businesses who don't have a website sphere. So when the consumer walks into a store and then goes home and uses a search engine to try to find them and doesn't find them, that's the gap that e-commerce fills, giving stores a web presence that may not be there. Additionally, it goes a step further, and from that website, it handles their payments, it handles the items that are being sold on that website, and then it delivers into the end consumer's home. So that's how the e-commerce gets that reach, is by helping businesses who otherwise wouldn't be on the internet at all.
In terms of the customers that you would like to provide this service to, you mentioned the luxury goods retailer. Who else would you think would be the prime customers that would be interested in this service? Also, you have another group of customers which are the manufacturers, right? What do you think about them?
Well, the pop-up boutiques are only going to work in luxury, right now, luxury good and retailers, because we have to be able to have a product that people are going to want to buy online, feel exclusive in buying it, and to walk them through the process of buying it on the iPad in the boutique. Since we're focusing on consumer goods, we're not focusing on grocery stores. We're not focusing on manufacturing because it's not in consumer goods. We're solely focused on growing the consumer goods through the e-commerce opportunity.
My question is, so you have two groups of customers right now as DKSH. One is retailer and distributor, and one is manufacturer. Right now you said you only focus in specific segment of the retailers, which are the luxury good retailers. My question is, who else in your current customer groups that you should provide this service to?
So in terms of like the healthcare groups or the technology groups, those types of sectors, other consumer groups, right? The retailers that we had in mind were more consumer goods in terms of some of the FMGC groups. So hair care products or makeup products, those would be tailoring well to these types of advertisements and pop-up boutiques and the e-commerce space. The reason being that these types of goods are non-perishable. So those types of consumers, retailers that have those beauty products or those hair care products are good, while people who have like food products are not. Those would be the other types of consumer groups that would be adequate for this type of growth strategy in the e-commerce sphere.
And as far as the other segments that we're not touching currently, because those are in the future for plans, by acquiring e-commerce, they're providing the website and that sort of capability to allow those companies then to grow their platforms as well online, because this is what they do. So if a certain company outside of the consumer goods space is missing the website to sell to the consumer, if that's what they would like to do, then e-commerce would work with them as well. Our focus for our strategy is just starting out with the consumer goods and luxury goods to get the platform going and the word spread.
If I was a customer of DKSH, what would attract me to come via the e-commerce channel that you're recommending versus going into the traditional store to purchase my products? I mean, what is it here that would really, attract me to the offering?
E-commerce is just, it's the space to be in right now. It's what's growing, it's what's now in Asia, it's what other companies are jumping onto, and basically, as a customer, if you don't jump onto the e-commerce board, you will fall behind. And that is the incentive there, is that consumers want the convenience of being able to purchase goods wherever they are. And so the customers that you're working with need to jump onto the technology board just as their competitors are in order to stay relevant in their spaces.
I just have a small questions on the pop-up boutique idea, which seems to kind of enhance the value of your in e-commerce quite well, but anyhow it's involve physical infrastructures quite extensively. Just wondering if your cost estimate for this is really correct. It's just 5.5 thousand Swiss francs per
so this would be
How
just...
can you clarify that you can achieve such a performance for just the cost?
To clarify, when looking into this estimates, as stated, it is for 1 year for one particular store. This is to show what the client would be incurring as a cost. And basically, it's not like a store, so we don't have to build up an entire building or anything like that. It is essentially shelving space and a mini closed-off section within the retail store or department store. And so because of that, the costs that we have outlaid for infrastructure, setup, and so forth are reasonable because we do not need to build an entirely new space. We are utilizing the space that they currently have, just in a better way.
And to add on to that, the service we are providing to the retailer to build this boutique for them. From there, it's going to draw more traffic to the website of the retailer. So it serves two benefits. It's not only helping the retailer, but it's also helping us achieve the Southeast Asian market by drawing more customers to use the online buying and transactions.
Are there any more questions? All right, thank you very much, Dynamics Consulting.